President Clinton and NATO Secretary General Solana recently announced that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization forces have initiated military action against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. This afternoon, General Shelton and I want to talk about the reason for the action, the scope of the attack, and NATO's goals. Military action is still underway as we speak, and the Allied forces remain at risk. And as a result, I hope you'll bear with us that the security concerns limit the amount of operational detail that we can give you this afternoon. NATO officials are going to provide more detailed briefings as the operation progresses. The first wave of the NATO attack began approximately 3 hours ago. Sea-launched cruise missiles fired from the United States and British naval vessels and air-launched cruise missiles from U.S. B-52 bombers began striking military targets throughout Yugoslavia. These attacks were followed by other strikes from NATO aircraft, including U.S. B-2 bombers. NATO aircraft also provided support for those strike aircraft. We are striking a range of military targets, including Yugoslavia's extensive air defense system, its command and control system, and the military forces that Yugoslavia is using to suppress the Albanians in the province of Kosovo. It is Yugoslavia's protracted campaign of military repression of the Kosovar Albanians that has made this action necessary to avoid humanitarian disaster and to prevent the spread of instability in Europe. NATO and the international community worked hard to get Belgrade to reverse its course without military action. We have tried for months to achieve a peace agreement, but while the Kosovar Albanians accepted the terms of this agreement, including a ceasefire, the Yugoslav army, under orders from President Milosevic, intensified its brutal attacks, killing people, burning villages, and creating a flood of refugees. While negotiators tried for peace, the Yugoslav army launched a force of more than 300 tanks, backed by hundreds of artillery pieces and armored personnel carriers, to crush the Kosovar Albanians. NATO could not allow President Milosevic to use the peace talks as a cover for his savage plunder. The military objective of our action is to deter further action against the Kosovars and to diminish the ability of the Yugoslav army to continue those attacks if necessary. And I'd like to be clear here. We are attacking the military infrastructure that President Milosevic and his forces are using to repress and kill innocent people. NATO forces are not attacking the people of Yugoslavia. They are attacking the military forces that are responsible for the killing and the carnage in Kosovo. All military action involves risk. We are making every reasonable effort to protect our forces while eliminating carefully defined military targets. NATO's forces are well trained, they're well led, and they are committed to working for a Europe that is stable and secure. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I know that you've got many questions, so I'll keep my comments brief. The President, Secretary Cohen, and the NATO leaders have already spoken clearly as to the reasons as to why NATO military action became necessary. NATO's military objective is clear. Our actions are designed to reduce the ability of the Serbian military forces to continue their offensive operations against the people of Kosovo. As you know, we're in the early stages of an ongoing operation, so there will be many operational details, as Secretary Cohen said, that we will not be able to share with you at this time. As always, we are reluctant to provide any tactical or operational information that may enhance the effectiveness of our adversaries, or that might degrade the ability of our allied forces to carry out their mission with as little risk to our pilots as possible. I know that all of you understand that, but I thought that I should reiterate it right up front for the record. At approximately 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today, NATO forces under the command of General Clark, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, and under the authority given by NATO Secretary General and President Clinton, began Operation Allied Force with a series of airstrikes against Serbian air defense and other military targets. Cruise missiles from NATO aircraft and ships at sea were launched to attack Serbian air defenses while reducing the potential for civilian casualties or other collateral damage. NATO manned aircraft, fighters, bombers, tankers, and surveillance aircraft are also participating in these operations. Given the obvious need to maintain security at this stage of an ongoing operation, I'm afraid I can't be much more specific than that. But as most of you know, in the early stages of any air campaign, we focus on degrading air defense systems in order to reduce the risk and the threat to our pilots and air crews in subsequent operations. This is the case in this operation as well. The air defense system in Yugoslavia is very capable, and it poses a considerable threat to NATO aircraft involved in the operation. And although at this point we have no indication of casualties to U.S. or NATO forces, we're continue to take all measures to reduce the risk to our pilots and air crews. But there's no such thing as a risk-free military operation. At the same time, NATO is also exercising extraordinary care to avoid civilian casualties or other unintended damage from these air operations. But again, you can never eliminate risk in a military operation. As Secretary Cohen said, NATO's action is not aimed at the people of Yugoslavia, but rather at the military and security forces that are being used by President Milosevic against his own citizens in Kosovo and those that might threaten NATO air crews. We remain hopeful that President Milosevic will reverse his course, but unless or until he does, NATO forces will continue to reduce his ability to use violence against the civilian population in Kosovo. The men and women in the U.S. military participating in this NATO operation are well-trained and dedicated professionals. I'm confident that they will continue to carry out their assigned mission with the skill and courage that are the hallmark of U.S. Armed Forces. Our thoughts and prayers are with these brave men and women and their families as they go in harm's way in pursuit of peace. And with that, Secretary Cohen and I will be glad to take your questions.
Secretary Cohen, what I ask, we understand that no NATO planes, as the General said, have been lost, to your knowledge to date. And we understand at least one MiG-29 has been shot down. Can you tell us anything about that?
We can't really confirm that at this time. There was some air-to-air engagement that has taken place. But I think we need more information before we can confirm what the result of that was. There have been some initial reports, but we're not in a position to really confirm that yet.
How many planes, may I ask, sir?
I really don't have that kind of information. Our aircraft have safely returned those that were in the region to date.
Mr. Secretary, are there really two campaigns here, one against the infrastructure of Milosevic in and around Belgrade, and the other against his forces, the armor and aircraft and troops in and around Kosovo?
Well, our mission is quite clear. We are determined to discourage and deter him from continuing waging his assault against the Kosovar people. And we are doing that in a way that will send a message, number one, this is serious, that there is united resolve on the part of all 19 NATO members, and that failing to deter him from continuing this type of action, we intend to diminish and damage his capability of waging that in the future. And so we have selected those targets will accomplish those goals.
One follow-up, if I may, please, sir. The danger, it would seem, if you're going after armor and you're going after personnel, using such aircraft as the A-10 Warthog and other aircraft, they might have to fly lower and perhaps slower. Is that the great threat to our aircraft rather than the high-altitude bomb droppings?
Well, as we've indicated in the past, this is a different environment. It's a very tough environment. It's mountainous. The weather is not necessarily friendly. It can be adverse. And so the climate, the capability of the air defenses all make this a very tough environment in which to operate militarily.
This mission marked the combat debut of the B-2 stealth bomber. I know you don't want to talk about a lot of operational details, but can you give us some idea of how this very expensive weapon performed in its first combat mission?
Well, at this point, the aircraft performed according to its capabilities. It's a stealthy aircraft that can fly in all weather with considerable ordnance aboard, and so we satisfied it was able to conduct itself and carry out its mission accordingly.
Did it hit multiple targets?
I really don't want to talk about what I was able to do.
Did it fly non-stop, and was it refueled on the way? It didn't. Did it fly non-stop from Whiteman and back?
I don't care to comment on that right now.
Can you characterize for us tonight what the extent of the resistance was, even in adjectives without being quantitative?
No.
Mr. Secretary, could you comment on reports out of the region that weapons factories and an oil refinery were on the target list?
I'm not going to discuss anything on the target list. The target list is extensive, and I don't want to indicate at this point what it is, what comprises that target list. I've indicated before that we intend to try to deter him from continuing his aggressive action, and failing that, to diminish and damage his ability to continue his efforts. So beyond that, I don't want to talk about it.
Yes, General Shelton, could you comment,
The focus
General?
was on air defense. Was that the case today? The focus was on air defense systems today?
The chairman has indicated that initially, as you're conducting air operations, one of the first things that we would want to do is to take down as much of his air defense capability as we can in the initial phases, to make it possible for our aircraft to operate in a less adverse environment.
To be a difficult target mission to avoid civilian casualties on the ground as you go into some of these target areas?
Well, we tried to always have tried to take that into account. We have planned the targets with great care, looking at military value as such in terms of what kind of a threat they pose to the people in the region, and doing our level best to minimize civilian casualties. So we have taken that into account throughout the planning of this operation.
Mr. Secretary, can you once again say categorically that there, no matter what happens, that there will be no use of U.S. ground troops in this operation? No matter what happens, can you rule it out categorically?
What we have indicated to the Congress and to the country is that this is an air operation campaign.
But that includes, does that also include going in to rescue anyone, should that be necessary?
Well, I really don't want to get into the details of what happens in the event that any of our pilots should be attacked successfully shot at. We have certainly a search and rescue capability in the region, and would have an absolute obligation to conduct those kinds of operations for our pilots.
And even if NATO ground troops are used, even if
sorry?
NATO ground troops are used, there will be no U.S.
NATO ground troops are not part of this particular operation as far as carrying out this operation.
Can you give a feel for the international, the NATO scope of the operation in terms of number of nations, the types of planes other nations are providing?
We have roughly 11 countries, the last time I checked, who were providing aircraft.
Any specifics in terms of tornadoes or mirages?
Well, there's a whole panoply of attack aircraft, support aircraft, tankers, other types of jamming aircraft. Whatever the nations have available, they're contributing. I've been calling many of my counterparts much of this afternoon, and they are strongly in favor of the action that we're taking and very supportive.
Does the initial damage assessment that you've done, without getting into details, indicate that NATO has delivered a pretty stiff punch, first punch?
It's really too early to get into battle damage assessment at this point. I mean, we're just 3 hours into it, and we have very little battle damage assessment.
We assume that it's going to end at daylight. It's going to be reduced to daylight. I don't think, or not too many air attacks going to continue to get a better assessment from you at that point.
Well, I'll yield to the chairman on that, but I would say it's pretty much up to the judgment of General Clark in terms of what he decides is really in the best interest of our country and protection of our pilots.
If there is not a change of heart on the part of Milosevic, is the United States leading NATO willing to continue this indefinitely?
The President has indicated that we will continue this mission until such time as we achieve the mission. And we believe that at any time, Mr. Milosevic can choose the course of peace. He's had that opportunity for the past year, in which we have been debating and deliberating within NATO itself and trying to persuade Mr. Milosevic that peace is always the preferable option. In the event that he fails to exercise that option, then we would continue in our effort to deter him from aggressively attacking the coast of our people. And if that deterrence is not successful, then we will continue to damage his capability of waging that in the future.
Is this going to be a graduated campaign with occasional pauses, or is it going to be maintained at a high, intense level?
I am not going to discuss what the campaign, the facets of the campaign. It is an integrated air campaign, and very carefully calibrated to provide the maximum objective.
Mr. Secretary, deterring Milosevic from the Kosovo campaign, which is the phrase you've used 3 times, is not the same thing as stopping him. is the US objective to stop the campaign in Kosovo?
We would like very much for Mr. Milosevic to stop his slaughter of innocent people. In the event that he fails to do so, what we have indicated is that we intend to continue, we, all of the NATO allies, intend to, in our effort to continue to damage his capacity to wage this war against and this conflict against the Kosovar people.
General, could you tell us how many sorties have been flown so far and how many cruise missiles have been fired? The Navy says less than 100 sea-launched missiles, but they were air-launched. Could you give us some idea of how many sorties?
Surely that's an operational level of detail that I do not want to discuss this afternoon.
Did you say more than 100
Because it's still an
missiles?
ongoing operation. We're not through even the initial phases yet.
General Shelton, can you explain in a little bit more detail what you mean by diminish and damage his ability to carry out offensive operations? Do you have a qualitative goal in mind for that? Were he not at some time to decide to sign a peace accord?
I think the way we define that as, if he elects to continue his repressive actions and his attacks on the Kosovars, that he will continue to lose capability that he has. That's air defense, that's command and control, that's units or tanks. It'll be the full range of military capabilities will continue to go down.
So does that mean then if he were to simply stop the offensive and pull back some troops, then the air war would stop?
I think that we will continue with, he'll have ample opportunity to come forward and indicate that he is ready to reconsider his actions, but we will continue the operation until both the Secretary General and President Clinton have made the decision that we would stop.
General Shelton, last night NATO apparently postponed the airstrikes because they wanted a full night of darkness as one of the reasons. Well, they have a full night of darkness tonight. It's about 11:30 at night there. You say it's continuing. Will it go on all night?
I won't get into the method of operation nor confirm that we delayed a night. I will simply say that the operation is underway right now. It will continue until such time as we achieve our objectives. It's not time phased because there, as you know, there are many things that can determine the length of time it takes to accomplish objectives, to include weather.
Will they continue in daylight? Will these raids continue in daylight, General?
That'll be up to the NATO Commander General Clark.
Right over here.
Do you feel they'll have some battle damage assessment on the air defense system?
I'm sorry.
Have you spoken to your Russian counterparts today? Is there any evidence that the Russian military is responding in any way? And what is your message to the Russians?
I have not had any conversations with my counterpart today. There have been ongoing discussions. President Clinton discussed this with President Yeltsin, and I believe that the Secretary of State has been in touch with her counterpart, and so ongoing discussions are there. Yes.
What is your level of concern regarding some reports that the Russians could decide to help support the Serbs in some fashion, either military equipment, that sort of thing?
Well, we hope that that won't be the case. We have many interests with the Russians, short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And frankly, we were hoping that Mr. Primakov could come to the United States because we had a very busy agenda. And we hope that the temporary deferment, at least, of his trip here can be re-engaged at a later time, and that any tensions that might be generated by this particular action can be diffused rather quickly, at least. We understand, and they understand, that we have overriding interests with our two countries, and we intend to pursue these with them as quickly as we can. So we watch it very closely, and we stay in communication. We will continue to stay in communication with them directly and through others.
Do you have any indications that the Serbs are... Do you have any indication that the Serbs have been retaliating against civilians since the airstrikes began?
We don't have any information of that at this time.
How concerned are you that the Yugoslav...
It doesn't mean it's not taking place. I just am not in a position to confirm that, whether or not it's taking place. We have no such information.
How concerned are you that Yugoslavia might try to retaliate for these strikes, either against a neighboring country or against U.S. troops in Bosnia or NATO troops in Macedonia, for instance?
We have always been concerned about any type of contingency that would involve a threat to our troops in the region or to the neighboring countries. We have taken those contingencies into account. We are prepared to defend against those contingencies, and frankly, Mr. Milosevic would be making a very big mistake should he attack our forces in the region or NATO's forces in the region. I think that certainly would be a serious mistake on his part.
Shortly after the attack began, the city of Pristina went dark. Obviously, electrical power has many important civilian implications as well as military. Can you tell us whether the power grid in Kosovo was part of the, was a target?
I cannot.
Mr. Secretary, can you tell Milosevic in some sort of adjective that this attack that so far seems to be punishing, that more might be in store? How would you say to him now what else might be in store for him?
What we have indicated to Mr. Milosevic, and we have tried in every fashion possible to exhaust all diplomatic initiatives. The fact that Mr. Holbrooke went as a sort of a last resort to say, we would like to see this resolved peacefully. We have the Kosovars who've agreed to this interim agreement. It is in your interest. You can choose peace, or you can choose continued conflict with all the risks that that entails. We hope that you will reconsider and choose the path of peace, but that is a decision that he must make, and we hope that he will make the right choice. But if he doesn't, then we are prepared to continue the effort as we've outlined it.
You said 11 countries supplied planes for this operation. How many European countries supplied planes that actually took part in strikes on this first night?
Well, I won't get into the composition of the strike force as such. We are satisfied with the operational plan that all of those participating are contributing to the success of the mission itself. Each country will contribute what it has available and what the commander feels is the best utilization of those aircraft. We obviously have very sophisticated stealth aircraft which perform an extraordinary mission. And they will be used to carry out their objective of taking down some of those air defense systems. Other countries will contribute assets which will ultimately significantly contribute to the success of the operation, but I wouldn't want to designate which country has which assets as something to do.
General Shelton, how will you know when the military objective is reached?
Some Russian military said that because of this operation, they will consider the possibility to deployment of nuclear missiles in Belarus. How serious do you take these statements? And my second question is, do you plan, as NATO's leader, to take any steps to minimize these negative consequences of this action concerning NATO-Russia partnership?
As I've indicated before, I can't really comment on any report about, I think you said nuclear weapons in Belarus. I have no comment on that. We, as I've indicated, have very substantial mutual interests in a U.S. and a NATO-Russia relationship. We will continue to work with the Russians on those areas of mutual interests, whatever differences we have. And I might point out that the Russians expressed their own considerable displeasure with Milosevic's activities. They were part of the negotiating effort. And while they may disagree on the use of force to bring about a peaceful result, hopefully on the part of Milosevic as far as using force, they have expressed that opposition in the past in Bosnia. And yet we have seen in Bosnia they are part of the peacekeeping force there. And so we hope that in spite of their objection to using force, they nonetheless do believe that Mr. Milosevic has aggravated the situation, has conducted himself and his forces in a way that is destabilizing to that region. And so we are hoping that in the coming days that we can continue to carry on communications with our Russian counterparts, that NATO will continue to carry on its relationship with the NATO-Russia Charter or the Founding Act, and that we will proceed past this period of time and continue on the very robust agenda that we have with the Russians.
General Shelton, how will you know when you've reached your military objective?
See you tomorrow, hopefully.
Yes, can you come back?
Thank you.
Okay.